color. That
Basing
thing
it
we're
off
seeing.
of our experience of that.
Okay, but where that we're getting that experience from is coming from like our parents and those people that taught us, and they all showed us the same thing. And they were like, "This is green," and we're like, "Oh yes, that is green." And so now we have an understanding of what that green that. I hate you.
I know it's mind-boggling.
No.
Actually, maybe I wonder because you know how like some people can pick colors really well and other people can't, and people that notice when it's not picked well that they're like, "Ooh, those really clash." I wonder if that's a sign that we can understand the similarity in color.
Well, I know that there's science behind the fact that certain people, like women, can see more colors than men,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
there's a science behind, and that some like that same way that some guys can see more colors than others.
Mm-hmm.
And so it seems like there's definitely a gradient in how much people can see. And so maybe like there's different greennesses that we would be seeing. Like we might not be seeing the exact same shade of that color, but we always have an understanding of the like
I don't think
general
you could
greenness.
actually prove that. Like
How would you like what do you mean by prove it?
you couldn't because it's totally based on experience. Like what I could be experiencing what you think of as red every time I see green.
Okay, what do you mean?
But
No,
we
no, no,
call
no,
it
no.
green.
No, 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 no. No. No, that does not work.
I feel like the way you could figure it out is if there's a way to capture an image of what your eye is seeing and then compare it to other people's images. Now,
Okay.
the question is, you'd have to have an objective thing, not another person.
Might be a computer might be able to do that.
Yeah.
Okay, but why would you need to look at it from each person's perspective if they can both look? Okay, okay, it seems like you're basically denying reality, is what you're basically trying to do. Because if we're both looking at the same, let's say we're looking at these olives, right? You're looking at the olives, I'm looking at the olives.
I'm
We're not
eating
gonna
the
say
olives.
we're not gonna say
This
anything,
is the answer.
right? We're not gonna say anything. Okay. On the count of three, we're gonna say what color this is. Okay.
We're gonna say green because words are conventions that we agree on.
You're saying all words are conventions?
Yeah, but I could be when I say green and we both agree in saying green, it could be an entirely different mental experience for both of us.
What do you mean by mental experience?
I could be seeing what you normally see as blue, and I'm calling it green. And so anyway, it's
No,
hard
no,
to
no, no.
explain.
Yeah.
This idea is that I don't know. How do we actually know that the other person is experiencing the world in the way we do?
Are you talking about like emotional attachment?
No, I mean it
Like
could be
it's
brought to that too.
Or emotional association, I guess.
I don't know. It's just this idea of like, okay, I have this. I'm especially talking about the sense of sight. You look out in the world and you have this whole picture, and you assume that everyone else sees the same exact picture. But what if we're actually all seeing totally different pictures? We've just agreed as a society subconsciously to make them work together through conventions.
You could definitely see that there's like degrees of what you see.
Color blindness is an example I think that supports the idea because we say, well, maybe it doesn't, but there's obviously some sort of evidence for people experiencing colors differently. I mean, it is interesting that we are able to label some people as seeing them wrong.
So they don't comply with the convention. Okay. So I'm still stuck on
mind-boggling.
No. I'm still feel like
This is
you're
the total
I feel
rabbit hole. We need
yes. No, but I feel like
pretty cool.
I feel like you're denying reality still.
probably at some point, but
No. Like the whole thing is just denying reality because it seems like it's built on the basis that you're denying that there's an inherent idea of greenness. We're gonna get
yes,
meta
I'm
like
not platonic.
yeah, you're
I'm more.
and therefore I won't listen to you.
Discussion. Well, it kind of reminds me. Did you guys talk to Dr. Bowen about the philosopher zombie?
Yes.
No.
Isn't this the idea that you could like, shoot?
It mimicked everything of a human perfectly, yet it didn't have a soul. So could you know if didn't have a soul if it did everything right?
I despise
This is
these
the Dr.
philosophical
Shield.
rabbit holes.
I know.
Oh, was this? Oh,
And
this is
in
the doc-
evolutionary. biology
Oh,
class.
that question or on the quiz? Yes, I remember.
If you composed a material being with all the activities and forms of a human being,
Mm-hmm.
how could you? Would it have a soul? How could you know it didn't have a soul?
Okay, it's never
We're
mind.
on this rabbit hole.
There's so
I
many
mean,
rabbit holes.
that's all we do on the when you have us two, and then you added this guy, like we're just gonna be one rabbit. It's like Alice in Wonderland.
I say we ask Ben what we should talk about.
Yeah, Ben, what should we talk about? Wait, roll the intro.
I was gonna say
What?
surf, but that's
You want to talk about surfing? Okay.
but
What's the most what's the most meta topic you got on surfing?
surfing is kind of like life, you know. It's like
Could you explain to me how shred the gnar applies in life?
shred the gnar is like so when you got a massive set and the day is just pumping. Huge sets coming in, like monster rogue waves every now and then.
I'm sorry, could you speak English?
You're speaking Hawaiian, not English.
That's not. Anyways. uh, I think we see all color the same, but I don't think we have the same emotional reaction to all the same colors. I think we all have different emotional.
You think so?
associations
Okay,
with
wait.
them.
Does a certain color make you feel a certain way?
Yeah.
The color of space.
Or like the color red can make some people think of romance or violence.
Oh, that is
It's
true.
like, okay, there's like the studies where they'll have like football teams that wear a lot of red typically are actually more aggressive than teams that wear like a different color.
That's interesting.
Which is, yeah, super interesting because it's the color of blood. So like, you know,
Yeah.
or etc.
Yeah, that is interesting.
But I think we can say that people are colorblind because I think we actually all do see the same colors.
Yeah.
Thank you for
I think I'm not playing devil's advocate, but I think he's saying
no.
the colorblind is actually I was wrong. I think it's actually the ultimate proof that there is an objective standard because otherwise we went well. Yeah,
Actually, something. So there's these glasses for the transit laser, which is like a little laser box that spins, like your little poles for like serving.
Oh yes.
And when you get it, they give you these red glasses to put on so you can see the laser better. Well, when you put them on, it looks like the apocalypse is happening. Everything just has like this red filter over it, and like when we all put it on, we all are like, "This is so red," you know. And so I wonder if that might be a hint. Like if you put a filter over, everyone starts seeing the same thing.
Yeah.
So maybe there is like this objectiveness coming out.
Now I agree with you that the fact that we named it green is completely just convention. But I think there's a reason that we named it green and we all call it green.
Words that are conventions, not the things themselves, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I could just see someone arguing like the reason I call this white. Well, that's a terrible example. Where's something?
The reason I call this black.
It's because okay, that was another terrible example. The olives, for example, they go back to these olives we're all looking at. I call those green because my parents, when I was growing up, taught me to label the mental experience I'm having when the light waves hitting my eyes in that certain way. They taught me to label that as green. That's not saying that what's happening in my brain caused by the light waves is the same thing that's happening in my parents' brains, right? So, does that make sense?
Okay, so you're basically saying your parents. This is basically like a very Humean reason. Never mind. We're gonna disagree. Okay, but it's basically like going back from the beginning of time. These whatevers decided that they had this experience of this thing, and they're both like, oh, we will call this thing green, right? And they didn't know if they were having the same experience, but they decided that that's what they're going to call green. And then that just like trickled down throughout the ages until where no one knows if we are seeing the same color, but we have just all been taught because our parents had this experience from those people, like generations and generations back, that we're going to call that green.
Essentially, like green is we all agree to call it green, regardless of whether or not it's triggering the same biochem or neuro processes in our brain. Yeah.
I don't know how to prove you wrong.
I don't either. I wish I could remember. I really.
Like there has to be a way to if you think about this hard enough.
Yeah, because what do they do with colorblind people? They heighten certain waves through their glasses, isn't it? That's how they can
I've
see.
heard of something like that. Yeah.
I know, like if you in video games, there's a color blindness setting, and it'll change the colors of the video game, so you see things differently. I tried it, and it looks like you're in like a neon negative.
Whoa.
thing.
Yeah.
Really weird looking.
Hmm.
But apparently that allows them to see color.
Yeah. There's also that setting I think on your like iPhones. You can totally mess with the
Yeah, you can invert all the
Yeah.
colors to their opposite
mhm.
opposite wavelengths. Your skin turns like neon blue, and it's really weird.
I saw an artist actually that painted it in the negative. It looks so cool. So he
Whoa.
would essentially yeah, he would make black everything that should be white and vice versa, you know. So he
So interesting.
he made some really cool
Wow.
art.
Yeah.
I guess the thing I thought was cool about it is you could see something like that and then be able to trace out all the negative.
Well, what's cool actually about that, there are these like eye tests that you can do where you'll stare at a dot and it'll show a picture in the negative. So it'll have like all the opposite colors. And if you stare at it long enough and then you close your eyes, you can actually see it in color when you
No
close your
way.
eyes. Yeah. So like
Oh.
when you see the sun, it's like you close your eyes and you can still see it.
Yeah.
It like leaves that imprint on your eyeballs. And when you close your eyes, you can see it
Oh my gosh.
in normal color, which is
That's so weird.
wild. Yeah.
That's so cool.
What's your next rabbit hole?
Well, I don't know. I have too many rabbit holes.
Well, do you have one in mind?
No.
Okay, because I was gonna ask you guys why you think truth sets you free.
Mm.
Truth sets you free.
It's a common phrase.
It doesn't.
Because you know, it's like a lot of people will say, once you understand the truth, it all makes sense, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, generally speaking, it's like in movies that you find out who the protagonist is or something like that, if it's a mystery or people that confront scary situations, you know, it seems like it's always the truth that will actually allow you to be at peace with something, and that's what sets you free. I was just curious, why is it like, because we have to have the right paradigms in our mind in order to act correctly? Is that why it sets you free? Or is it actually finding that truth is always what's going to bring you to a better thing?
I wish I was given a script of this podcast.
We don't have to go down.
Needed this interview to be more like certain politicians these days.
Exactly. If I wanted you to come to my house and provide me with a script, and this was only supposed to be 1 hour, Tom. Anyway, enough making fun of.
This okay. Yeah, this question has come to my mind in a different form a lot. Because I'm working as a man who promotes liberal education in a very direct way. And this liberal education, the idea of the education for a free man, the way we've gone about it as graduates of WCC, we're pursuing the free education through what? Through reading a lot of books and studying a lot. And somehow this underlying all that somewhere is this conviction that how do you be actually free? How do you have a free soul? Well, you learn, you acquire knowledge, you acquire this broad understanding of human nature. And if you do that, that's going to, be this liberating force in your life. So I guess we find ourselves in an awkward situation where, that's what we did with our education for 4 years. We just went truth, truth, truth. And reflecting on it for me, I've just realized that somewhere in that pursuit of truth, I've witnessed this ability coming out of it to engage with the world more meaningfully and ultimately, see God, if that makes sense. Like, that's like, I think the ultimate justification of the pursuit of truth is that what is truth? Truth is a correspondence of your mind to reality.
Mm-hmm.
Why on earth would that would be helpful? Well, that's only a freeing thing if that reality that you're corresponding yourself to is itself created by the reality that is the end of all of our lives. And so, yeah, I guess if truth is defined as, let's correspond our mind to this world that we live in, to what is actually real.
That olives are green.
Yeah. That is ultimately freeing and justified because that reality is created, and it's created by the being that is our ultimate end. That was
So
complicated.
well, yeah, let's break that down real quick. That was a great overall. What do you mean by free?
I don't know. I guess I'm just like I'm uh subtly replying to the objection of a person saying like, why is it even important to pursue truth?
Yeah.
Like why not you just go pursue money making skills in your education and in your whole life? Like, why truth in and of itself? And my response to that, and I think it has to do with freedom, but my response is primarily just like, okay, truth gets us to God.
Okay.
And I guess unpacking unpack that statement. But
Well, I think if you could define truth or freedom as the ability to choose better things, then it would make sense that truth sets you free because then you have a more understanding of what you can choose. So I think that's why like a lot of the reason why I asked this question is because I've been trying to figure out why some people just don't seem to make things click. Like you'll give them facts, you'll give them figures, you'll even give them the sources that are on their side telling you what's actually happening and they still will deny it.
I believe I've seen videos of this online.
It's crazy. And I don't know what happens to people. I don't know what turned off in their brain to like not see it. Like I'm not saying that we all see the truth indefinitely, but it's like you start seeing patterns and you're like, okay, this pattern results in this consequence. So it's almost like they lose their ability to see cause and effect. And that's why I was wondering, like, can or how do you help people see the truth so that they are free again? Because all the people
Yeah.
that seem to be on the side of like, you know, they just fall for whatever the propaganda tells them, and then they become slaves of that system. And it's like, well, how do you tell them they are a slave? How do you tell them that this is something better? And it's okay to know that they were in the wrong for so long, and it's okay to be in the right now.
You know who has the answer for this?
Who?
Plato. My boy.
Good boy,
My boy Plato. Yeah, there's a whole chapter in the Republic. It's called the cave, where it basically highlights.
Might have heard about it before.
Yeah, you might have heard of it.
Too distracted. Sorry.
Then look at me, not the shadow. I am the light.
Turn around, man. Turn around.
But yeah, because basically in that, what he's trying to do is, well, I've used it in a couple different ways, but he's basically giving this image to how people have been fooled throughout the ages. To basically, they're not seeing things in reality anymore. They're seeing the images on the wall. So that seems to be kind of what is happening nowadays, just through a TV, right? It's like everybody has been told all these lies and everything, and all their proof for it is just what people have told them. And they're not even trying to see what is real for themselves anymore. They're just taking for granted what has been shown to them.
Yeah. I almost wonder if we're facing a deeper problem than Plato could have faced in his lifetime. Just the fact that like it's so hard to have conversations with people who are diametrically opposed to you. Like,
oh yeah, no.
We can like us and a lot of people in our community, we can disagree but still have fruitful conversations because we have so much shared ground that we can like there's something to talk about. And even if we like within that shared ground we can have differences, it's still just fruitful. But when you come across someone who somehow has gotten to this point where they don't share anything with you, none of your convictions, none of your political convictions, your metaphysical convictions, anything, like in my personal experience, it's just where do you even start with that? Like,
yeah,
you can't say, look, you believe in this and this is what it leads to, because there's none of that like commonality. There's no that you have to go so far back to find some sort of commonality with these people that what do you do? How do you have a constructive conversation with them?
I feel like that's where we kind of get to like Tom's question, right? Like, how does the truth set you free? Well, you have to want to know truth, right? And like most people, it doesn't seem like they even want to know. You'll see videos of like, I was one of my coworkers was telling me about these videos that were online. It was basically these um Kamala supporters, and this person was going up to them and being like, "What's your favorite policy that she's passed?" Right? Can't name a single thing. Like, oh, how has she benefited this country over the past 4 years as vice president? Silence. Why are you voting for her? And they like can't give answers, right? It's because they've literally just been like trained to like, we're gonna vote for this person. Why? Because we're told so. And so like if those are the type of people that we're encountering in the world who are literally just doing what they're doing because they are told and don't even think to ask a second question, like you're not going to be able to convince them of anything because the only thing that they have in their head is the talking points of the media. And like they don't even know it themselves, right? It's not like they were like, "Oh, I want to know the truth about this thing. Let me go look into it and see what answers I can find." It's like, "No, this is just what I've been told. This is what I have in my brain. I don't even can't give you a reason why I'm doing the actions I'm doing. It just that's what everyone else is doing. Like where are you can't get anywhere with that because they don't even know why they believe something in the first place. It's just what they've been brainwashed to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the crazy thing is like you think they would at least wanted something to change based on their own experience. Like you think they've noticed like their bank account isn't as full as it used to be.
Yeah.
Or it's harder to work a job, or rent has gone up, or there's wars in the world now, and like all these different things, and it's like, and even now, it's like big time celebrities are like, look, we're at the
Oh, yeah.
turning point. Like, wake up! Look, like Jake Paul today just endorsed Trump. I don't know if you saw it.
Oh yeah, actually,
Yeah,
that's wild.
yeah. It's like you have big names. Like you have other people like. Well, I guess those be older people now, but like Hulk Hogan and
Oh,
they're just like, look,
Elon Musk,
Elon Musk,
Kill Tony.
Kill Tony.
Yeah.
Yeah, like all these people are like, hey, this is a big point. And it's like, then they'll write those people off too. It's like those celebrities were their heroes until they side on the other way. And then they're like, oh, they're not my hero anymore.
Yeah.
And it's like, what you were listening to them, but why are you not listening to them anymore?
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know. Aren't a lot on the other side guilty of the same thing though? Like,
Mm,
I think on both. I mean, maybe more on the Democratic side of things, but it seems like maybe just the American populace at large,
Yeah.
even if they're voting for Trump or voting for somebody you agree with, maybe they don't even know why, and um, I don't know. Maybe it's more widespread than just one party. Maybe it's kind of a whole cultural thing where somehow this idea back a few hundred years ago got in that reality is subjective, truth is subjective.
I wonder who that could have been.
And yeah, I guess that's just like, how do you have that's the ultimate undermining of all common ground.
Yeah.
Um, you can't base your arguments with another person on the idea that this reality you're encountering is the same and it's objective, it's independent of your viewpoints. Then like everything just evolves into shouting matches, it seems like.
No.
And I think you can see it in the political stuff, but I think like most powerfully you can see it in like the ideological stuff, like LGBTQIA or whatever it is. Like some of that stuff. I mean,
You forgot a letter. You just
sorry.
offended so many people.
I thought it was AI. I thought that was a big thing.
I have no idea at this point. I don't even know what those letters stand for. But no, it's just like the basis of a lot of those arguments that you encounter. Like there's no common ground you can have with someone that thinks they can be two things or that thinks that they can define their own existence because they've abandoned this idea of objective reality. And what are you going to base your arguments on if they don't accept that? And like, but I mean, the principle of non-contradiction, like Aristotle says, people who reject that, it's not just that they're wrong. It's like you can't even talk to them.
No.
They like you should. What does he say? They should
Be thrown in jail.
But they're nothing. They're like vegetables. He said.
Yeah.
You can
Oh,
talk
that's
at
it,
them. You
yeah.
can talk in front of them.
Mhm.
But having a conversation where you're actually sharing ideas, it's possible.
Which
This
is just
actually, well, sorry. This actually happened to me this summer. I was at some party at somebody's house, and this guy showed up because he was somebody's friend who brought him along. He's a super cool guy, super chill, and we were just talking and stuff. And he was like, "I got a question for you guys. Do you think like objective reality exists?"
yeah.
And I ended up talking to this guy for until 3 a.m.
Wow.
on a work night, trying to convince him that objective reality exists. And the only thing I didn't like, the only argument I didn't use was like grabbing him by the shirt, like just shaking him violently until he was like,
Subjectualize this.
That's
like,
literally
subjective or not. Like,
that's literally it seems like what you have to do. Like, don't you remember our classes on Kant?
yeah.
Like, and literally, someone needed to punch this dude in the face. Like, that literally seems like the solution at the end of the day when they begin to like deny it that much.
What did you say to him?
Well, we were talking, and I basically pinned him on every point. He was like, "Well, what if it doesn't?" I was like, "Dude, that's a self-defeating argument. That there's nothing objective because that's an objective statement. Like that you
Hmm.
just contradicted yourself
Mhm.
in the fundamental thing that you're trying to prove.
Yeah.
Like that's not you can't do that.
You
the-
just can't.
the amount of mental gymnastics this dude was doing, and then he's like started addressing the problem of evil, and he was like, "Well, like I don't know if God exists because all this terrible stuff happens, like kids die and that sort of thing." And then he says at one
Just as a
point,
regular
just,
party you're
yeah,
at.
yeah,
Regular
Evolved.
this
WWJD
is
throw
after
down.
the fiddling happened. But at one point, he was like, "Oh yeah, my mom was a non-Luciferian Satanist," and I was like,
Now I understand this man a little bit more.
"Yeah, exactly." I was like,
Oh my-
"Okay, this makes sense," because
Wow.
he was like, "Yeah, I'm the one who determines what's right and wrong for me."
Oh, Lord have mercy.
And I mean, at the end of the day, like if you deny objective reality, then that's all you are. Is
Yeah.
You're a Satanist, basically. You worship yourself because you are the only one who gets to determine
Yeah, there's no morality anymore.
what morality
Yeah.
even means. So it's like, yeah, my morals are better than your morals because those are my morals. So you
Yeah.
deserve to die.
Well, yeah. But isn't it true that when you come across those people, it's almost like you can't argue with them, or like
Yeah.
at least when I face that, think of myself facing those kinds of questions, it's like, wow, how do I respond to that? Like, it's kind of a genuine feeling of being stumped. And I think it's because yeah, I mean, going Aristotelian on this, but like what he's objecting to is so fundamental
Mhm.
that it's like prior to any arguments.
Mhm.
It's this like basic vision of reality as other than me.
Yeah.
You can't prove that. It's just like the human thing to view, like the human thing to do.
Yeah.
And if you cut across that, it's like there's no argument that could go against that.
Well, it's essentially like a fundamental denial of charity because charity is like the greatest of all the virtues, right? And then the antithesis of that is pride.
Yeah.
And when you say that I am the supreme arbiter of all of my morals, then you're saying like, screw everything else. It's all about me.
Yeah.
And if you base your system off of that, it's an unsustainable. You can't survive with.
Yeah, I mean, it would be a totally ludicrous way to live.
And it's super comfortable. Like if you get to just decide what's right and wrong, and you feel totally fine with that, like you're essentially it's so comfortable. And as soon as somebody starts saying something objective that you don't really like because it pokes you in a way that makes you
Mhm.
uncomfortable, then you start really hating that thing.
Yeah.
And usually with these types of people, it's the truth. It's like, but it made me really sad too, actually, because this guy, he seemed really smart because he was just saying all of this, not because he had read anything, but because he had thought about it a lot.
Yeah.
And he started making points like Descartes made. He's like, but I can think, and I know that I can think. And so I was like, I kind of jumped onto that, and I was like, you know that you can think. That you can't deny that because you know you do. And then he was like, yeah, but, and then,
I mean, they can go pretty far down that road if they're willing to.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think a lot of people who really deny the principle of non-contradiction, they don't actually in the way they live. Like it might be a mental concept they have, but they live their life as if it were true.
yeah.
They drive, the car that's going to be on a head-on collision with them if they're driving in the wrong side of the road is, it's just it can't not be there if I don't want it to be there. So they don't drive on that side of the road because yeah, maybe the more experiential thing is kind of disproving their intellectual conviction, but
Yeah.
I don't know. You could have in a conversation like that at 3 a.m. Sometimes they're willing to go incredibly far into like absurdities, but absurdities that are consistent with this idea that nothing is.
Yeah. Cognitive dissonance.
But my question is that ideology, that denial of is and not is that new? Like, is that a new thing in the modern world, or is that like I don't know, the connection you made with Satanism is interesting. It's like maybe that's the oldest thing in the world. um, but I don't know, because I'm always tempted to say, oh, look at how terrible the modern world is, and like look at how we're devolving and it's falling apart. But then I'm like, okay, was it ever not this bad?
I think one thing to look at is how much was it socially acceptable.
Yeah.
Right, because like we can look back at, obviously someone had tried to do something because Plato and Aristotle all talk about it.
Yeah.
Right, or at least have responses to objections of the world, of a worldview like this. But just because they have objections, we don't know how widespread it was back then, but we can see how widespread it is now and how few of people actually try to stop it instead of encouraging it. I think that's the biggest tell of like how far the modern world has fallen, is that instead of saying, no, 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 you are a man, like even though you want to be a woman, right? Instead it's like, no, no, of course you are, right? Like we don't know who you are. You can tell us who you are, right? The fact that that's how everyone is thinking. So I don't really know.
It seems like most of the problems in history were a result of people having a bad system. They had a system, and they were like, we're gonna follow these rules according to these dictations. Like, for example, in the Nazi Party or like Nazi Germany, they hated the Jews and they killed millions and millions of Jews. But for them that was okay because that fit within their system.
Yeah.
But they also killed a lot of homosexuals because they believed that that was also a bad thing. And they're like, that's something that we need to get rid of. And so they had some sort of system where they're like, these are the things that are bad that we don't like.
Yeah.
If you're gay or Jewish or Christian, then we probably don't like you. And you should maybe go to a concentration camp. But if you're, just a dude who has blonde hair and blue eyes, you're probably pretty cool.
Yeah.
But it seems like with this, with the problem with the modern day is just that you're the system, and there is no other system that matters.
I mean, do we think that there was like going back to John's, I guess, question, do we think that there was a system other than the self in ancient Greece or Rome? Like, where was the basis for that?
Still sort of seems like it stemmed from their religious practices.
That's what I would think. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like the people that Socrates and Plato and Aristotle were responding to as, deniers of the principle of non-contradiction, those were the crazy philosopher class. Yeah. And probably definitely not the polis, like the leaders of the city endorsing that, or the common folk. It seemed like in the ancient world, you were very much not the definer of your own existence. Like politically, I mean, a lot of slaves, but also just in terms of your religion, it seemed very much like you were totally at the behest of this supernatural order.
Yeah.
Maybe that supernatural order was a lot messier than Christianity's, but it seemed like the general populace was living in this world that very much there was a ranking, there was a hierarchy that transcended them. So it almost seems like maybe this is looking at history too neatly, but we've kind of bitten off chunks of that again and again through the various different major upheavals in philosophy until we've gotten here. Like, I mean, I don't know, Christianity is a weird thing where
True words of
maybe that's maybe that's the ultimate reality of the opposite of what we're talking about. Like Christians, early Christians, they were looked at as crazy because they were willing to totally give of themselves. And I mean, that's a testimony of the martyrs, that this like ultimate proclamation that I am not the one who defines my own reality, and my own reality is actually something that should be sacrificed for the sake of something higher than me. But so like that's where maybe the ultimate other extreme is, but then Protestantism, like maybe that's the first moment where it's like, oh, who cares about the Pope or the church? Like I can read scripture.
Yeah.
And like sure, like yeah, maybe there's still a God, there's still something more powerful than me. There's still this moral system that I have to obey, but reading scripture and like that thing, like I can do that for myself. I don't need someone else to tell me. Then, you know, I don't know, it just seems like that. Then you get the Enlightenment. People intellectually saying I can define, like Descartes, I can do my own thing. I am at the center of it, but sure, I'll still conform to the moral norms. I'll still be a man and not try to transition to a woman. Like that, I don't know. Maybe it's just like, okay, we're actually just gradually going and following what maybe the Protestants started. I don't know. That's extreme, but does that make sense? It's like
no, it definitely
this idea kind of infecting more and more separate realms of our lives until we get it to now where it's, I mean, the fact that intellectually reality is subjective, like that's almost old news at this point.
Yeah.
Now we're like, our genders are subjective. That seems almost like a more forceful, dramatic embodiment of that principle.
Yeah. So basically, you were just tracking. I just want to make sure I get this right. It's basically in ancient Greece and going forward, we had this understanding of like something above man, right? Like some hierarchy that we were participating in and that we were being ordered to by something.
Yeah.
And so throughout the ages, we slowly lost that hierarchy. And instead of us being subordinate to something up there, we became masters over all of creation. And that's where like we get to like the Enlightenment, or like you were kind of going at it through the religious aspect of it, where like looking at the Protestants first and being like, oh, the Protestants were the first ones to be like, no, I don't need this whole authority thing from the church. I can read the Bible for myself. And then we started taking that mindset and just like transposing it onto every different subject, like philosophy, science. And that's how we got to where we are today.
Yeah. I mean, I think with the Protestant Reformation, it's a very like small step in a way. Like you're still saying, okay, there's still something higher than me. I still believe in God, still believe in this moral order that I have to conform myself to. But this one thing I'm going to say, like the relationship I have to this higher being, to this God, is something that I define, I interpret for myself. So that's like the first step. And it just seems like historically it's snowball effect from there. It's like, once you say that you can read the Bible, you can interpret Revelation in the vacuum of the self with no other influences, like that seems to be okay. Now, how far of a leap is it to go? I can, philosophically define my own existence, and then I can morally do that, and I could even, biologically do it, which is where we're at now. And that seems, yeah, it seems like it does kind of have a cohesive progression from that starting point.
I definitely agree.
But anyway, then, so I mean, this is kind of a weird circle back, but the whole color discussion we had seems to be
what I've been thinking about.
Seems to be like maybe an instance of that, where what the idea of the principle of non-contradiction and this saying that reality is entirely subjective is kind of that argument where we all experience it in our own ways. Like you have your truth, I have my truth.
Yeah.
Like who am I to say my truth is better than your truth? Like, isn't that so hateful and discriminatory to do that?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. How do you respond to that? Like that, I'm genuinely. How do you respond to what seems like one of the biggest problems with our society?
Let me just fix this over a bottle of Bullet whiskey real quick.
Is there any better way to do it?
Speaking of Bullet, we are reaching out once again. Please sponsor us. I am in need. Zen too. Anyway, just for you, Tom. Hey, I want half of that pallet if it ever shows.
Man, I'll call.
Okay, back to solving the world's problems, I suppose.
Yep.
So how do we fix it? That's your
Okay, well,
that's your grand
let me
question.
put the scenario to you. The scenario is that you approach someone who's not within your ideological circle of today.
Oh, hi, John
You
Walsh.
say, you try to convince them. No, you think I'm bad? I mean, no, and you go up to someone and you say something or you try to convince them of something, and they respond, hey, look, that's your truth, but I have my truth. And who are you to say that your truth is better than my truth? Isn't that so prejudiced?
Oh my gosh.
How do you respond to that? Like that,
I
I
would
don't know
start-
the answer. It's a genuine question.
Do you want my actual response?
Okay,
I
sure.
would start laughing. Like straight in their face. I would just start laughing at them and be like, "Oh, you poor fool."
Yeah, I'm not sure how helpful that would be.
That is going back to Ben McCarty's point. That is not the charitable response. See, at that point, like, I honestly don't know where you begin. Like, if someone utters the words "my truth," at that point, you just know you're in trouble.
You know they're in trouble.
Well,
The
yes,
conversation is in trouble.
everything.
I wonder if like what you do is you ask them like, well, what do you mean by your truth? Like, is this the rules and principles you like to live your life by?
Yeah.
And then I think maybe you could just maybe you have to see what their truth leads to. Maybe
See,
'Cause it's like if you try to like maybe to answer like the gender like gay thing, it's like, well, okay, so this is obviously unnatural because nothing comes from it.
Mhm.
So there's something there that was made to do something. How is this actually going to make that outcome happen? And now, usually, a lot of people say, well, animals do it. It's like, well, it still doesn't produce another animal.
Yeah.
So it's not actually natural, and that it leads to a natural outcome. It's like if two trees tried to like brush each other to like make acorns, it's not going to make acorns. It's not the
Some
process.
trees do pollinate.
This is
They're
true.
Here to be your lifetime or live action fact checker.
Like big. But yeah, like it's not like you're gonna get anything from it, maybe.
Yeah.
That's true.
I mean, I'd almost maybe I don't know how effective this would be, but just like start with the absolutely basic things, like maybe ask them, well, why does 2 + 2 = 4? And like, is that true? Is it true for just you or just me? It seems like that would open them up. Okay, maybe like that thing is true for all of us. That's objectively true.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe something like very physical. Like, is my hand here? Is that true? Is that a true statement? Is it just true for you? Just true for me?
Is my hand connecting with your face at a rapid velocity?
Yeah, like with the guy, like that. It almost is a valid response to say, look, like I'm shaking you, and that's something that you have no control over. Like whether or not you think I'm shaking you or not, like your body's feeling it, and maybe that's a baseline to say, okay, it's you recognize that there's this reality that is outside of you that you're conforming yourself to in those ways, in those like small physical ways. Then you can build from that up to the more like, okay, let's talk about religion all of a sudden or morality.
It's just such a slow walk.
I think it has to be.
Again, that's what Plato says.
It has to be a slow walk because you're walking so far, and that's kind of we talked about. Like
you don't want
to. There's not an easy shared ground to start from. Like you have to go back to the very basics of shaking you or like.
But isn't it just concerning? Like I've seen videos of Ben Shapiro doing this.
Yeah,
right? Like literally doing the 2 + 2 argument.
Yeah,
and people don't accept it, right? Like,
well, I mean, you could give somebody as many logical arguments as you wanted, and they can all be perfectly sound, but none of that matters if there's no if they or you have no charity in the game. Like
you think
that's very interesting.
Because, why charity?
Because if you don't love something, then you're not going to care about knowing it.
Oh.
But I mean, this is also what we talked about first or second semester. So I think first semester sophomore year, where you have to know something first before you can love it.
Was this in a Dr. Olson class?
No, this was in a Dr. Mortensen class.
Oh, then I probably paid attention. All right, continue.
But like it was in Aquinas's
Oh yeah, the compendium.
yeah.
Oh yeah, I remember this class now. Okay.
Yeah, it's like, okay, we have to know God somehow in some small way.
Yep.
Before we can actually love
Yeah.
him.
Mm-hmm.
And then once we learn that, we're like, okay, now I'm choosing this thing, making a free choice.
Someone remembers the topic.
Yeah, I'm making this choice to seek out this thing because I see the good in it. And I see, the beauty or whatever. There's a kind of love there.
Okay, I feel like sorry.
Go ahead.
I feel like we've opened up a new like bouquet of problems with this answer. Like we have charity. I love charity. That's great. And then we have beautiful and good. And those always have a conundrum for me because then it's just more terms that we're trying to get people to understand when we're having this conversation.
Mm.
And also the idea of charity, like it's just a very Christian argument to make, which is great. You know,
I'm not sorry.
listen, I get it.
I can't turn it off yet.
I got an idea. We could replace charity with awesomeness. So,
Everything is
so if like so most people I won't see like, oh, I love something, so I want to be close to it, because most people will think of like loving something as like personal. But
Really hope the mic picked that up.
but yeah, like people will talk about things that they like, so it's like they form an attachment to something.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that's where you go to people. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
you're attached to this. I think like a lot of left-leaning people or we can't get to are really into like sports and entertainment and music and all these different things, which are all really good things, but it's like they just don't make the connection of like, oh, that's why it's a good thing, or that's why it's a good thing. They like it, but they don't understand why.
Yeah.
Well,
Maybe you go there. It's like, okay, you like the one thing. Why do you like it? And it's like, we'll probably say, well, it makes you feel good. Why does it make you
Yeah,
feel
well,
good?
yeah.
Is that the right track?
No, I definitely do think that is the right track, but I think the problem is, and Ben kind of has the Christian solution to this, but I'm going to pose the objection anyway, is I feel like they're equating the love or the liking that thing like with just pleasure from it.
Mhm.
Right? Like that's where like
Oh.
it's so hard to have this conversation about true good, beautiful, like these are the things that we should strive for always, because they're not looking at it as I love this thing because it's a good thing. It's simply because, well, I enjoy it. Like
Yeah,
it makes me happy. I have fun. Like that's the basis of like that's like the top tier that they can get.
It's the difference between God is love versus love is God.
Oh,
You want to flesh that out for us?
Yeah.
You know?
that's
Well-
kind of
Mic drop.
Wait.
Okay, well, okay, we're Christians. We believe that God is, he's existence. He's, the perfection, the infinite, uncreated, perfection of everything. And he is also the perfection of Brian's hair. But like, anyways, and then I guess the heathenistic or the modern perspective, which is synonymous. Anyways, would be that whatever I like
Mhm.
is good, not whatever is good I should like.
Yes,
Oh.
exactly. Which is
But okay, that's true. But I think the question is more like, how do you take someone who love is God for them, whatever they like is right, whatever they think is truth, and how do you convert them?
mm-hmm.
And I think what you said was really important in that arguments can only go so far.
Mhm.
Like if you come across someone who's really, sitting across the table from you, but they're denying the fact that they're across the table from you. Like you can't prove them through a logical argument that they're there in front of you or that they're around a table or that, like it seems like the approach to those kind of people has to be almost like pre-rational or like, yeah, the importance of the poetic, the experiential before like the reflective or before the logical proof.
Okay. I'm just gonna go on a rabbit hole real quick. How can poetry be a solution to an understanding of reality?
Well, I was saying poetic in the broader sense, not just
Okay.
like written poetry, but like
Okay.
the poetic mode of knowledge. Like send that person out in the backcountry for 21 days.
So experiential.
Yeah, I think poetry is a kind of highly intentional experience. That's what the poet is doing to you, is conjuring images and experiences in your mind in a very intellectually designed way.
But would that, all right, maybe I'm misunderstanding you.
No.
But like the poetic or the poetry only seems to be useful if that person already has a like love for reality. Right? If you're trying to use like images and experiences to convince them of something, like it seems like they already need to believe that that something is.
Yeah, I guess so. But I don't know. I think it's actually like if you're genuinely trying to convert someone, the place you have to start, I think, is just somehow getting them to an experience of genuine beauty, genuine truth, like experiencing reality as bigger than them, as something that they can't neatly package in their own consciousness. And like, I mean, that's like the early Christians again. Like, what they didn't go out and like have a bunch of soapboxes. No, they went out and got killed in front of a whole Colosseum.
Yeah.
And that something that was like way before an argument. Like that was the first thing that people were like, "Oh, wow, something weird is happening here.
Yeah.
Something like different than everything else. Let me go talk to them and see what they argue for."
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
so it's like the visceral, very experiential, moment where you're like, okay, maybe it's looking at beautiful mountains away from technology, or maybe it's like reading a beautiful work of poetry, reading the Iliad, something where it's like, okay, I have this experience. I don't really know how to explain it, but this has brought me to this point where I know that reality is bigger than me and that good is beyond me. Now let me go talk to my friend and have him dialectically argue about that. And so does that make sense? Like,
No.
I think the place where the logic stops and can't work anymore is where you have to supplement. Okay, let me just live out a witness for you. Like, let me be happy and like live out a good Christian life, and then you're gonna see my happiness, see my genuine faith, and just that is gonna, at least I hope, I sincerely hope that will be what saves the world.
See, but I feel like it could even be more simple than that. But I feel like that will save the world in a more like stoic way. But I'm still thinking about the person that just like completely denies reality. Just take them into the woods and let it rain on them and keep asking them, like, do you want it to stop? Oh, has it stopped yet? Like, just like that, like put them in because I think we're so used to just having everything in our world controlled for us. Right? Like, oh, I feel uncomfortable. Let me turn the heat up. Like,
I think
that,
like that's aggravated.
Take them out of that. You stick them in rainy mountains for, 3 weeks, for example, right? And then you learn to be like, oh, yeah, I have no control over any of this. And the more I like wish that it wasn't happening, it doesn't make it stop.
Briggs, are you implying that suffering is salvific?
Oh, I might be on a podcast coming soon with Bella Westlow. Please let me be here and just in the corner with a microphone and just be like.
Does that make sense? Like what
No,
you're describing of like, why are those experiences helpful for this person is because they're suffering, and suffering is implying that you're not in control.
Yes,
there's something else that is controlling you, that is more powerful than you, that is objective, and we are a culture, society that seemingly hates suffering
Yeah.
and does all the technological stuff we can do and psychological stuff we can do to minimize suffering. And I think there's a reason for that.
And I think that is like the basis of our problem is that mindset. We want to do whatever we have to do to help you not suffer.
Mhm.
Right. And that's why doctors are like, yeah, of course. Like, well,
Prescribe you.
yeah, I'll prescribe. You know, whatever makes you feel better, right? Like that is our whole mentality.
You guys want to hear something crazy?
I would love.
Have you guys ever heard of?
something crazy.
Have
Is
you
it a
guys
dad
ever
joke?
heard? No. You guys ever heard of death cafes?
No.
Okay, so there's this thing apparently that's mainly in Southern California, but it's spreading, where people get together as a community, at typically at a cafe, and essentially have this session where they just comfort each other and pat each other on the back about death. And
Just
they
that they are gonna die.
they just
or-
like have this space to be totally fine with dying and just have this attitude that like it's totally meaningless to die. It's just like you're passing into nothingness. It's fine. And it's like this whole community that's centered on saying this death thing is totally normal and totally something you shouldn't have any anxiety about. And let's use all this psychotherapy to get you to not fear death at all. And
Yikes.
like to me, like obviously, like you should think about your death, but you should think about it as like this is scary, and death is like the ultimate what shouldn't be happening to the human person. Like
Yeah.
it's the ultimate sign of the fact of that we're disordered, is that we're fallen, is the fact that we have to die. And like these people are getting together and like they're undercutting that. They're saying this death thing, no, it's not that result of sin. It's not like something about the fallen man. It's just normal. We're just biological creatures and we pass away. And like death, suffering, let's just become comfortable with it. Let's take antidepressants and go to, psychotherapy and just be totally okay with this like cosmic tragedy that it's the human death. And like that's like that these things are happening across the world apparently. And I don't know, that to me, I was just blown away by that, because I think when you start saying that death is okay and then it's not like this fundamental tragedy that this supernatural soul has to be separated from its body and
Yeah.
die, like that's putting forward a totally different conception of human life.
I mean, but that's been the viewpoint for. It's not new, right? People are just coping with death in a different way now. Like most people have not believed that it's this like eternal soul that is in a body for a while now. Like, good old buddy old Darwin over there, did a lot of good there, right? Like proposing like we are purely biological beings. And like I feel like that there's just so many problems with man.
Many.
Yeah,
Endless.
But it's just, you keep bringing up new ones. I'm like, can we stick to one?
No, I think I was just mentioning that as like the culmination of this aversion to suffering.
Yes. Okay.
And like
Okay.
let's no longer like, grapple with like King Lear did or like Achilles did, like rage against the dying of the light. No.
Yeah.
Let's just accept the dying of the light, be okay with it.
Yeah.
Realize it's natural. Like that's not what a hero would do. Like that's the ultimate sign that humanity has lost its call to supernatural reality, is when we're fine with death. And
That's so interesting and true.
Reminds me of Mother's K. That one guy. Get what it was.
Dr. Virginia.
It was Shooby-Doo. Schubert. Oh, that one I didn't even cover the mic. Oh,
Dr. Schubert, if you're watching this, remember that.
I already graduated. Saw her again the other night. Anyway, continuing on, Tom.
There's one thing in there. I don't remember. It was this really creepy guy in the story, and he was talking about how he would be fine if his eternity was like sitting in a small room looking at spiders in a wall. And
Dimitri, right?
No, I think it's Smerdyakov.
oh, that's it, Smerdyakov.
The guy who.
Was that guy with punishment?
Oh, I don't know. There's a lot of Dostoevsky characters that would fit that.
But yeah, like it was kind of like this just fold over and die feel, you know? And I feel like that's what the cafes are like.
Hmm.
I have nothing left to give, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like maybe it's like that mentality of like what you don't care enough maybe to fight.
Hmm.
You don't love enough.
Like, well, like doing hard things, suffering, that is only worthwhile if you're suffering for something that's beyond yourself. Like, if there's nothing beyond yourself, then your comfort, your self comfort is paramount. And like, what would you ever willingly undertake suffering for? Nothing, because there's nothing outside of yourself. So like, I guess what we're describing is kind of a symptom of yeah, this denial of objective reality. When you deny objective reality, you deny objective morality. There's nothing worth suffering for anymore. And yeah, so we try to eliminate suffering absolutely across the board. We try to create technology. I mean, not that I don't like a good comfort technology, but AC, heating, all sorts of things that it's like let's reduce suffering to the maximum. Then we get into okay, you have a problem in your life, go to counseling, go to psychotherapy, which is no longer about okay, let me go to my spiritual director, let me confess my sins. No, it's like let's go and train you all these mental habits to absolutely eliminate anxiety and eliminate pain. And I mean, there's some wacky stuff going on in therapy, and a lot of like Eastern philosophies coming in, a lot of like yoga philosophy, where it's very much about
just gotta stretch it out,
let's meditate, and let's get into this place where the pain that's being inflicted by a disorder in our soul not something we feel anymore. And then I think that's like the furthest step of that seems to be this idea of like death. That let's totally get rid of all the pain and suffering and fear associated with death. Again, because suffering is not worth it, and the ultimate purpose of human life, because we've denied objective reality, is just Epicureanism. Back to Epicureanism, I guess. Like, if you're the only thing, then you might as well have a good life. you know?
Yeah, it's like the Matrix with that one guy that just wanted to go back in the pod, you know?
Have you seen the Matrix?
I have not seen
I
the Matrix.
knew it.
Sorry.
You should have a movie night and watch the Matrix. Such a good movie. Anyway, continue with your point, because
Yeah. Well, I've seen most of it.
But
Yeah.
oh no, that brings into an interesting topic. This might be I don't know if this is top or not, but did you guys also have that zombie in a vat argument? Brain in a vat argument? Like we're just plugged into a computer simulation right now. And so like it doesn't matter what we do, it's all in a simulation. You can't know if it's a simulation.
this has been one of my greatest
Wow.
fears
Wait,
since I was a kid.
the
Like
Truman
straight up.
Yeah,
The Truman Show.
Yeah.
It's literally been a fear of mine since I was a child. Since I saw The Matrix, actually. Just feeling like, what if it's all fake? You know, I'm just gonna wake up one day and it's all gone. Like either that or it's a dream. It's like my two of my like biggest fears. Anyway,
I think that's kind of the biggest fears of humanity. Like,
well, I'm glad that I'm human. That's cool.
well, I mean, that's ultimately, I think, like, what did the serpent say to Eve in the garden?
Yeah.
Like, you're living in a computer simulation by God, and he's just hiding the fact that you can define your own reality from you.
Yep.
And like that was the like cosmic doubt that started the cascade of sin of like, oh wait, God is just tricking me. Like objective reality doesn't actually exist. I can define it. I can become a god. That's the temptation that was like in our Christian tradition is one of the first moments in human history of dealing with that problem.
You know what's so weird about it is I think the best image we ever have of that is Milton's Paradise Lost. Like it is just so beautifully done with how well he like shows how well Satan got into the mind of Eve and just that desire to I want to control it, you know? And it's just like because it just reminded me of your point about Protestants, right? But like the most beautiful and like or the best depiction that we have of it besides, the actual Bible, which isn't like as clear as I would like it,
yeah.
unfortunately. But that,
God,
that's my fault, probably. It comes from
God should have asked me to edit his paper.
comes from a Protestant though, right? Like even though like they were the ones that like originally wanted to have that mindset of I can be the one that chooses how I depict this. Like the very fall, he like depicted it so well in Eve. Yeah, random thought.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Wait, so Tom, what was
What was the actual?
what was the actual? Yeah, sorry.
Like, if we could figure out, it seems like they try to deny objective reality even to like your own personal experience, which is that argument of brain in the vat thing. Well, maybe you don't even have your own experience, and that's what that argument's trying to say is like,
Oh,
maybe we're all in a simulation and there is no objective reality, and these people are right, and we'll never know.
so you're asking us to disprove the brain, the vat?
I wonder if because if that would be like the ultimate way to come bring people back to objective reality, because that's kind of like the most extreme form. I think it's like saying you have no free will essentially, like it's all programmed, and then your own subjective reality is just you playing the video game how you want to play it. But I feel like the thing about that though is like, why do so many things happen consistently over the same frame to all these different people throughout history?
Yeah.
And it all brings you to one thing that seems to be very redemptive,
Yeah.
Because if it's just a simulation game, then it seems like someone just trying to have fun. But if it's actually like we're here for a reason, then it all makes sense. It's
Yeah.
like you find meaning in life through all these different experiences you have, and they all seem to point towards the one thing of like there's something like, who actually loves you and wants goodness for you. And I feel like a computer simulation wouldn't have that in the programming.
I
Because then it's just a fake out. It's just like it's putting you all in this thing that's not even true at the end.
I think the problem is though that that's something you can never demonstratively disprove.
Yeah.
Because like if the whole theory is that every single thing we've experienced is simulated, is fake, put on for us.
What does that even mean? I'm sorry, but like I've we didn't cover that at least in my section
No.
in school.
Okay.
And so I guess I'm just confused what that would even look like or mean. Like if everything was just if we're pre-programmed, if it's just this whole simulation, but like what does that mean for us? Like honestly, what's the difference? It's kind of my question there. Like whether like you're saying we can't prove it. Like we can't demonstratively show that it's false and we can't so what does it matter? I suppose if we're able to find all these patterns like you're saying we can, right? And we could say, "Oh, well, maybe the creator of the simulation loves us." And we're like, "Oh, that creator is God."
Well, yeah, I think what's going on is that the person who thinks that way, who thinks we're just a brain in a vat or everything is
Yeah.
simulation, what ultimately that imagery is getting at is saying that person is saying all of our experiences are not trustworthy because they could have been conjured for us or they could have been something put on for us.
Okay.
And obviously we can't disprove that because the only thing we could prove it based on is our own experience.
Okay.
So does that make sense? And that's like that's one of the arguments that Descartes actually starts with of like, oh, well, I could be dreaming.
Yeah,
I can't trust
okay.
my
So
senses.
it's kind of like the Descartes.
It's kind of like that, and it's kind of impossible to prove that experience is worthwhile because you only have experience to go on.
Yeah.
And so what you have to respond to that kind of argument with is something, again, not an argument, but just an experience that is so visceral, so real that it breaks that perception. Like,
But that doesn't seem to break that perception then. Right? If all we're basing it off of is, oh wow, the simulation is really good. Like, how does that break us out of that?
Because I think I mean, I think the only way you could probably get out of that scenario, that simulation, is faith.
No, on like that.
Like a conviction that isn't argued to, but that is held on some other sort of authority. Um, and I think the authority you'd have to rest on is just this basic trust of sense experience. How do you justify the trust of sense experience? Well, I mean, I couldn't give you a like watertight reason that sense experience is worthwhile, but that's just how I'm going to live my life because it's such a fundamental conviction that I have.
I I guess maybe one way to get out of it is asking the question of how is it beneficial to live your life like that? Like, what are you getting out of living your life like it's a simulation?
I think then
Is-
people can justify relativity to themselves.
Yeah.
Relative.
If it's all
Is
just
that what it get us to? Like,
if it's all just a simulation, like do whatever you want.
I guess, this is like the satanic, viewpoint.
Yeah.
So, like, it's just another way of justifying that. Like, that's what we get out of it. It's like, well, if it's a simulation, then I can just, I can be my own arbiter of good, and it has no consequences. That's all it does for us.
Probably.
Okay.
And even if it was a simulation, then we still know that our logic works and that we can still come to the same conclusions, even if this isn't like, even if I am just a brain in a vat. Like,
Yeah.
I know that I can think.
Yeah.
I know that things are real and that there are certain reasonable, like, philosophical steps I can take to discover, like, oh, yeah, God does exist. And, like, this certain system actually works and is logically sound and coherent and can be followed and should be followed. And I don't know.
Like, every time you break out of it, your life gets much worse. Like if you break out of the moral system God gave us, then things get terrible. So it's almost like even if you are in a simulation, you should still play by the rules that seem to make the most sense. Almost like a Pascal wager, almost.
Well, kind of, I guess. But like
Maybe that's a way out of it, honestly.
maybe, but
Not a convincing one, but it's kind of the same argument.
I guess what I would say is just like faith, true faith is not faith if it can be proved or like if you can believe it based on the weight of some argument.
Yeah.
And so like yeah, the conviction that there is a God and that the world is meaningful, I guess there's ways you can prove that within reason, but if someone has rejected reason itself and they're not going to subscribe to, Aquinas's 5 ways,
Yeah.
it just seems like fundamentally they have to make this decision of how they're going to live their lives, and that decision is a leap of faith. Like it's an actual leap of faith because it's not something they can neatly argue to. Like there's seems to be some point in everyone's lives where they have to say, I'm going to have to just make a decision about what the world is to me and how I'm going to live my life. And somehow these experiences that have been granted to me have built up in me this conviction that the world is bigger than me and that there's something out there that transcends me, and I'm going to follow that, or I'm going to reject all of that.
Yeah.
I mean, like we're gonna have to make that decision again and again. But that seems like what faith is like. Sure, you can do a bunch of argumentation within your experience, within sense experience and reason. But like when it comes to why do you trust reason? Why do you believe that there's objective morality? You can't prove that reason is worth trusting by reason. Like that. I mean, this is what I think C.S. Lewis in one of his books, his proof for the existence of God and miracles. It's ultimately he puts it forward like if we want to say that we can reason, that we can trust rationality, that can only be justified by the conviction that there is a God.
That is that is so not satisfying.
No, and it shouldn't be satisfying.
So unfortunate.
If faith was satisfying, it wouldn't be a virtue.
Okay, but I don't want to live Oh, I'm such a heretic. Okay, I don't want to live my entire life, Mo. How do I? That's always a heretical term.
Tune in next week for when
Father David, are you listening?
Okay, let me think about this for a second.
It's a safe space, Briggs.
No, it's not a safe space. I don't think I don't see it beneficial to have this entire argument go funnel down into, well, we just have to have faith, right? And that's basically it or not. Like that just doesn't seem very satisfying to me, or like we're not going to be able to get anywhere in the world today with that type of argument.
Well, okay, I think it's not satisfying for a reason. Because if it were satisfying, then reality would be oriented towards you, and it's not. And like I really think that there is a reason that God is not constantly visible in the world.
Okay.
Like there's a reason why he's not, there's not a booming voice coming from the sky all the time.
Yeah.
And I think that reason is ultimately good for us. Like it's good that God came to earth, lived here for 33 years, but then he left, he ascended.
Yeah.
And there's like whenever I get to that, like the mystery of the ascension, like why did you leave? Like just still be here and I could go talk to you and see you and touch you and I could believe. But it's like throughout his whole life, Christ, blessed are those who believe without seeing. Like
Okay, but that is one thing when it comes to faith itself, like faith that, God came down here, died for our sins. Like that is one thing, right? But reason, like the argument you seem to be posing was even reason itself needs to be based on faith. And that just seems really problematic to me.
well,
I guess it depends on how you define faith, because, and like maybe if you define faith like you accept an axiom, because like you can only live in life if you accept principles of start. Like you have to have certain things you accept and
Yeah.
move forward, and you can't prove those things. You just hold them to be true.
See,
Maybe
that would be a more convincing argument to me than just saying faith. Or at least like maybe it's me and my like Euclidean mind, going back to Dostoevsky. Ha, did that reading. More incrimination. But
nice for you, man.
it's been a bad day. I'm just continuing the trend. But it was Dimitri, right?
Probably, yeah.
I'm pretty sure. But right, like looking at the world and like having it all want to fit into boxes, or like being able to have proofs for everything. Like reason I don't want to say is based on faith, because then I have to believe that I have a reason in order to get anywhere. Whereas if I could say, no, reason is something that I can hold as a first principle inherently contained within reality. Like, is there a difference there between what you're saying and what I'm saying? Is there something wrong with
I don't
that
know.
take?
Well, I think you're correct, because yours would follow a timeline of human history that makes sense, in the sense that since we weren't given faith to begin with. Like, well, I guess like when after Adam and Eve and we didn't remember what it was, we still had to be able to make choices that led to a good life, like the noble pagan, like Aristotle and Socrates were trying their best with reason.
Yeah.
And reason is the foundation that you can believe Christ.
And
because if Christ can either be two things, he can either be God or a liar.
Yeah.
But it can't get you all the way.
No,
Like,
I
it
don't.
expose you.
I don't want all the way.
What I'm saying is like going back to the person who makes the my truth your truth argument.
Okay.
Like what that person is fundamentally saying is that the way that we're programmed to view reality is a deception. Like the way that the child growing up views reality is like the table is actually here and like things are real and we're living in an objective reality. That's kind of the natural way of doing things in my mind. And it's only when you look back and like get yourself wound up in wrong ways that you start rejecting that. And so what you would have to say to the my truth your truth person is actually that way you naturally face the world. That way you grew up facing the world as objective. that is a valid way of facing the world because we were created that way. Like, does that make sense? The way in which you view reality, this whole thing we call reason, it seems to have its ultimate justification in the fact that we were made by a reason. That the way that we naturally face the world is intentional. It's created that way, and I don't know. I think the person you couldn't convince that person through mere reason because they've rejected reason. Like,
Okay.
that makes sense?
No, that definitely does make sense. I guess I was looking at it from a more ancient perspective, and the fact that, and this goes back to one of your early questions of whether the modern man is worse off than like the ancients, right? Because it seems like they never had to grapple with this question. It was just, no, this is the way that we were made. This is the way that reality is. But you're saying, no, we have to go a step beyond that nowadays because people are even denying the fact of the way that reality is. And we can't just make the argument like me and Tom want to make of, oh, it's, it's just the way it is. It's first principles. We have to go beyond that and say, no, and maybe this is just the Christian perspective, but no, we were created that way and we have to have faith that that's the way that the world is. Whereas the ancient wouldn't have had to do that because they wouldn't have even had a concept of it otherwise.
I don't know. Maybe I went too far in saying that we have to go all the way into the theological.
Okay.
But it seems
maybe
like
that's what I was a little bit.
What you have to do is to that person, you have to get them to give some amount of trust. Maybe you call it faith, but some amount of, okay, I can trust my senses.
Yes.
I can trust the reality in front of me. And once I do that, you get someone to trust their senses and like shake them, then you can logically get to God. Like that's the whole natural theology of St. Thomas Aquinas. That's
okay.
Proclaimed as doctrine in the church that you can get to a natural proof of God.
You're literally talking about natural faith versus supernatural faith.
I don't know what I'm talking about, but I'm I'm describing this like fundamental position, this relation to reality of, okay, I can trust my senses and what is being presented to me is not something I have to think of as a simulation or a dream. Yes. Like, and how do you get that? I don't know. But like once you have that of like, let me learn from some sense experience, go through the Aristotelian process of intellection, then you can get into a reasonable proof of God, the 5 ways.
Yes.
But if someone like you can't use St. Thomas's, proof from motion if someone denies the fact that anything's moving, or like,
no, I think we're saying the same thing.
Yeah,
I was just being nitpicky on the term faith.
Yeah, I don't think you have to get someone to immediately believe in God. I think I was wrong to say that.
Okay.
I think you can, but it does require some orientation towards reality that is just surrender or that is trust.
Yep.
Because that's the only way they can learn anything. Otherwise, it is just like that what I'm describing, that trust or surrender is ultimately this first admission that the world is bigger than me. And like I'm getting outside of myself. And only once you can say, oh, there's things other than me, only then can you actually start learning from those things other than you.
Okay.
The problem is like, I guess I was talking about this earlier with like poetic and experiential learning, but how do you get someone to that point where they trust the world outside of them? They have faith that the reality is bigger than them. And I don't know. I think that's one of the hardest questions probably that humanity is facing right now.
We'd have to.
I think we need another episode
to. Probably. Yes. I guess the reason I was so interested about this is because, like, it's really hard when you see not only other people in a place where their decisions are making their lives bad for themselves, but their decisions are making the lives of all of your loved ones bad as well.
Yeah.
So then it's like, it's not like they can just live on their own existence, which is what they try to think they can. It's like, no, literally they're destroying everyone else's lives.
So destructive, yeah.
So it's like, well, how do you help these people destroying the lives of the people you care about? How do you stop them from doing that? Because like you have like a responsibility to take care of the ones in your life that closest to you, like your family, your friends, the people like God puts in your life. How do you protect them if all these other people are convinced by whatever it is to think that their whole life should be an antithesis of what their life should actually be.
I think that's the hardest when, for whatever reason, those people who, yeah, go down this road of denial of objective reality, it's hardest when they're coming actually from like a Christian family.
Mm-hmm.
And like I've seen it firsthand of like absolute pain and suffering that can cause for the whole family to watch that happening. And yeah, it's kind of weird that they have this conviction that, oh, I'm just doing my own thing, and I'm an island in some way, and why would my truth like be upsetting to your truth? Like, isn't that, yeah, they make literally the objection is like, you're being so prejudiced by being offended by me, like. So I don't know. That just is such a painful situation because there's so many personal tensions going on, and um I don't have an answer to that because I mean it's just a tragedy when that happens.
Yeah. No, I guess I just been thinking about a lot in light of the election. It's like,
Yeah.
look, it's not just you like this person more than the other person. It's like, look, literally other countries are begging us to get Trump back into office because they want peace in their country.
Yeah.
Like, like in Britain and Japan, I know for at least those two for sure, are having their own Trump rallies saying we gotta get America to vote for Trump because we want to end the wars. Like,
Yeah.
it's not just us. Like, other countries are also saying like Trump's the only one that can stop World War III. It's like it's not just like you think, oh, it's good to have a woman president. That has no dealing
Yeah.
with the consequence that's coming about. Like, if someone just flips the wrong switch, the world could be over in 10 minutes. It's like these are the kind of levels
Stakes,
of,
yeah.
yeah, the stakes at risk. And it's like, how do you convince somebody, like, look, don't make that decision. Don't even think about what you're gonna do to you. Just think about all these other people that are begging you not to make that choice. Like, make the right choice for all of us. So maybe that's it. Maybe it's like you have to actually be Christian
I think
to actually make other people's lives better.
I think that's the hardest, but maybe the only answer is like,
I don't think.
how do you convert someone who has gone fully down that road and is just a moral relativist entirely? Like, live a happy life and actually live your faith. And I maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Apocalypse is actually a true book of the Bible, and things are going downhill inevitably. But when logic fails, when argument fails, when fighting fails, you have to just fall back on praying for sure, but also just living out your life in a very visible way so that those people, just by seeing your life, are hopefully brought back to beauty and back to love.
I'm sorry, but that's just a weak answer to me.
I know.
I'm sorry. It's the pagan.
What
in
is?
me, I
Do you have an
suppose.
alternate?
Yes. I think it all comes down to, I don't think it's dependent on Christian, and I don't think it's dependent on like Catholic beliefs, and like prayer is always going to be a good thing and a thing that we should all do. But I this was kind of like the conclusion part of my thesis, but it's like to be a good Christian or a good Catholic in a country does not just mean, well, everything's going to hell, so I'm just going to pray about it. Like that is not the solution that is going to actually be beneficial to the state. What's going to be beneficial to the state is you actually going out there and doing something about it. And I think a great example of that is like the people in like Turning Point USA, like these Christians that are trying to have like actual conversations about these things and trying to convince people, right? They're not just sitting and being like, well, I'm going to pray for this country. It's like, no, like the most important thing to do right now is actually to just have conversations with these people that have been so brainwashed and just show them like maybe your logicking isn't good, right? Like even if you're stuck in the system and everything's like controlled, just like let me just show you why your logicking here doesn't work. Like just
Yeah.
pure and
Well, I just was gonna say I don't think those two options are diametrically opposed.
no, and I don't think they're opposed, but I think the emphasis needs to be on a more practical solution
I
versus
don't think it'll work. Like you see
why.
the people on the Ben Shapiro Turning Point USA videos who
Yeah.
just devolve And they
And-
they don't admit what's clearly in front of them. And
And-
like whatever logic that Charlie Kirk or Ben Shapiro throws at them,
Yeah.
it's just like, whew.
Yeah.
And those, like, what do you do with those people? And those are the most dangerous people in society.
No, it's the most dangerous people, but those are the people that like I remember it was Ben Shapiro. He had like a conversation with someone like that, and then or maybe it was Steven Crowder, I think, who it actually was. Who had a conversation with these people, and then like 6 months later, they like reached back out and was like, "You were right." I've been thinking about that since I had that conversation.
I hope that happens to more
Well,
people.
yeah.
but-
The whole point of like those conversations and those debates isn't to convince the person in real time because
No.
that's not gonna happen. It just
No.
doesn't happen. Like if that does happen, you just witnessed a miracle.
Yeah.
Congratulations. It's about planting a seed. Like
Yeah.
Clara talks about this all the time. It's like she did tons of like sidewalk counseling and like pro-life work all growing up. And the thing that they kept reiterating was like, it's not about winning the argument that you're in and convincing them on the spot because that's not going to happen. It's about planting a seed.
Yeah.
And then they're the ones who get to let that seed germinate and actually change the way they think if they choose to or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And some people choose to not let it. And that's a horrible and evil thing to do, but like they still do it. But I think for the most part, when that happens to people, they do kind of lean into those thoughts and
Yeah.
actually poke and pry and say, okay, what was this actually all about?
I guess what we're saying is just like there have to be many different ways of planting the seed. Like maybe one of it is going out and arguing with people. Maybe something else is just going out and doing pro-life, like very visibly praying
Hmm.
in sight of people. They drive by and they're
Yeah.
like, the 40 Days for Life sign is not going to convince them that abortion is wrong like that.
Yeah.
But they're like, oh, something's going on there.
Yeah.
And
It's still worth doing.
yeah,
Still
so
worth-
like that's I guess that's the solution of like living what you believe and living your Christian faith in an extremely visible way.
Yeah.
Visible in you're arguing about it, you're having conversations with people, but also you're actually living it out
Yeah.
in a way that's giving witness to people who maybe aren't right off the bat convinced by the logical argument, but by like just the vision of you living a happy life with your Christian family.
Yeah.
Maybe that's going to be something that's like, oh, yeah, there's the seed.
I can agree with that, I suppose.
The other way to get to people is with humor.
Yes.
Mm.
Yes.
Like,
Babylon B, man.
Saving the world
One joke.
at a time.
You know, my parents met the guy. that
No
runs it?
way.
What's his name? Seth. Yeah, they had dinner with him, and they.
What?
Yeah.
Is this when your dad got his black market Cuban
No, that was
cigars?
another thing. No, no, he gave a talk at a pro life rally, and
Hit the bleep button.
anyway, yeah. But what was your point?
I saw this thing. So Donald Trump Jr. shared this thing. It's like, so the world's being taken over by the one world order. Freemasons, communists, socialists, like pretty much every evil thing you can think of. And how do we fight it? Memes. And I was like, it's so true though. It's like hilarious. It's like you can't help but laugh at it because you see what it is. Like, I don't know if you guys heard about Biden calling us garbage.
Oh my gosh, yes, and Trump showing up in
Garbage?
What?
Yeah,
No
did
way.
you see this? It's genius, like pure political
That's
genius.
hilarious.
Like literally, it showed up in a Trump, like completely cut, like Trump signed garbage truck, and
Wearing an orange
wearing
vest.
an orange vest like a garbage worker. The entire rally.
Oh my god.
Okay, it was crazy because like I started listening to the Joe Rogan podcast with Trump today, and it was like a clip. I watched this before, but a clip of Joe being like, "Yeah, it's insane." Like he showed up, did a podcast for 3 hours, and then got on a plane immediately.
Went to a rally.
Went to a rally in Michigan, and on the way there decides to like drive a garbage truck. Like
You know, Trump has apparently not taken a day off in 55 days.
I
Yeah.
believe it. He's
That's just
checks
an
out.
animal.
it's like he's like 79, 80. Like
He gets 4 hours of sleep a night.
crazy.
And that was his schedule for like when he was president. He ran over 4 hours of sleep a night.
Thought we were going 10 to 4 president hours. No, but that's okay.
And
That's
full
very.
with a 2-hour lunch break.
I want to be
My dream
philosophical. About this.
schedule. Well, 10 to 2.
My dream schedule is like 10 to 10:30. No, but I think it's really interesting because what you do when you laugh at people and you make jokes about them is like you call them out as absurd.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like what does it mean to be absurd? Like you're clearly out of step with something that is objectively true and like everyone else sees is objectively true. And the humor is like it's pointing out the absurdity. And maybe that weirdly is like one of the best remedies for like just pointing out the absurdity to a very wide audience is getting them back into touch with the reality in relation to which they're absurd.
Yeah, and the thing is it's like if you laugh at something, you don't feel like someone won something over you.
No.
Because it's like it's genuinely funny. You're like they just said something that was made sense and it was funny, and now I like what they said. So like, and it all started with Kill Tony
Yes.
at the rally, and he was like, "So there's this island floating in the ocean, full of garbage, and it's called Puerto Rico." That's just started. Just started the whole thing.
Yeah.
And people were like, "Gosh, like that was not the right move." But it was like it right now it's playing out very well.
Yeah.
Like we are running with it. Like so I love Donald Trump Jr. so much. He came out with a yellow flag with a garbage bag on it and said, "Don't tread on me."
I mean, it's like the basket of deplorables kind of thing.
Yeah.
They just keep doing it to themselves every time.
But yeah, like
I don't know, man.
that's it because like you don't want maybe because we have that instinct of not wanting to be won over in battle. And maybe
Yeah.
like that logical argument is like you do this so many times and then it's like, oh, you
Yeah.
won over me. I'm gonna get you back because like I have to change my whole worldview now because you won this argument. But if you do it like with humor, then they laugh at it like, oh yeah, that's actually a good point.
Yeah.
The Greeks, they had it right,
Aristophanes, bring it back.
Please.
Yeah. And funny thing is like you when you start making jokes about things more and more, like you start pointing out absurdities or whatever, I feel like you start seeing the world in a much more peaceful way. Like I've noticed people that make the most jokes are generally the most peaceful people I know.
Yeah. People that don't have a sense of humor just don't seem happy in a really deep way.
Yeah, like you can't even.
Well, no, okay. You guys read Calvin and Hobbes, right? There's that.
Oh, yeah.
that one strip. It's like Calvin is talking to Hobbes, and he's like, "Why do people laugh or something?" And Hobbes is like, if human beings weren't able to laugh, they would not be able to react to most of what happens in their experience. And like, I don't know, one of those like crazy moments in Calvin and Hobbes where it's like, oh yeah, I can't laugh if I can't have a sense of humor. Like, I've lost a major way in which human beings deal with fallen reality.
I mean,
Yeah.
St. Lawrence, he was getting roasted alive.
Yeah.
Absolutely, like he's getting cooked alive. He just looks at the Romans and says, "Turn me over. I'm done on that side." What?
Yeah.
So good.
Just think what those soldiers were like. Like,
Yeah, how do you react to that one?
I think this is something that like those who tend to be democratically, support the Democratic Party, they just don't seem to have as much of a sense of humor. Like they take everything so seriously. Like the garbage Puerto Rican joke, like obviously a joke, but it's like anything you say, any racist joke you make, anything like that, it's all of a sudden, oh my gosh, like censor you, cancel you, you're such a racist, terrible person. And like that's directly attacking the humor thing, like the fact that we're absurd. And if you call anyone else out as being absurd, you're all of a sudden hateful and it's hate speech. And like, yeah, that seems to be an indicator of where that's coming from.
that's a really good point. Yeah. Because, like, I don't know many Democrats personally that smile much. Like, they'll make jokes and have a good time, maybe, but they don't really, like, they don't seem. How to describe it? I don't know.
Well, I think that's the whole.
Youthful, maybe is the right word.
Yeah, like isn't that the whole?
Yeah.
That's the whole idea of being politically correct.
Yeah.
Like, there's this such a high value put on saying the right thing and being, totally but like anyway, my point is people who are politically correct, I think that's the fact that they're not willing to have humor and not willing to say things that are pointing out absurdity. That's actually a really deep problem.
No.
And it's kind of like what Shakespeare talks about with like you have to have the fool call out the king's mistakes.
Yeah.
The one that can actually influence the king,
Mhm.
because everyone else will be under scepter. Like the jokester can get away with it because he's making a joke.
Yeah.
But if someone else was like, "No, you're wrong," and the king's gonna be like, "No, I'm always right,"
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, like you have to have people to able to make fun of things and to see you through the hilarity of it. Like, there's this guy I follow. His name's Alex Ramosi. We talk about him all the time. He has this one. It's like he says everyone's had a hard childhood. It's like, okay, you have the hardest childhood. Are you like, all right, moving on now. He's like, he's like, look, like he's had guys come up and they're like, yeah, I just can't sell. I had a really rough childhood. So he's like, okay, you're telling me because your mom didn't hold you enough when you were a kid, you can't tell somebody this is a good thing to buy. Like you just put it in those terms, then you're like,
How insensitive.
yeah,
Oh my gosh.
I know. But yeah, it's almost like it breaks that mind trap for a bit. Like,
Yeah.
oh,
But the politically correct thing, sensitive thing, actually just perpetuates the mind trap. And like, if you're so, concerned with being politically correct that you don't call anyone out for being absurd, then you're just gonna stay absurd and they're gonna stay in the rut. And yeah, that's the whole danger of what we're facing is that no one's willing to like wake people up, because they could get canceled for it.
Bring back bullying, baby.
Yeah.
What?
Bullying.
It's true though. Like people are so sensitive. Like I feel like most people like you can't even point out a flaw. Like
yeah.
because then it's like crushing to their entire world and then they're gonna end up in therapy and then they're gonna end up being a woman or something. Right? Like it's just like this horrible like train of effects is like, oh, I need to get out of this like, discomfort that is happening to me. And I can't deal with the fact that someone said something mean to me. Like it's just all about like how dare they do that to me, right? Like it's not like
Bad I feel I'm gonna stew in my emotions now and
Yeah.
be miserable, and I'm happy when I'm miserable, so I'm gonna keep being miserable.
Victimhood.
Yeah, exactly. Like they just like thrive off of this victimhood and it's never going to like there's no way of escaping it for them.
It's to depression and all sorts of bad things.
But like that is overlooking, I think, the incredibly important reality that sometimes the most loving thing you can say to another person is that you are totally wrong.
No.
Like that's actual love when I mean, not like some ways of doing it are wrong, but you can actually show love to someone by saying you are doing the wrong thing and you need to change. Like there's something really wrong with you. I'm going to point that out and help you fix it. Like that's genuine love. When you start saying that all of that saying you're wrong, all of that, pointing out absurdity is inherently evil and you advocate for total tolerance, I think you're actually like cutting people off from the most meaningful love they could ever experience. And like you can't, I mean, yes, in some respect we're supposed to be tolerant, but when you take it to an absolute and say we're supposed to just let everyone go out and do the horrible things they're doing without saying anything, without calling them out, like that's not true love. And that's ultimately, even if it's in the name of love, it's like the worst thing you can do to your fellow human being. Just let them sit in their own sin.
It's even worse than that is that's what they call freedom now.
Yeah.
Right? Like get back to like where we started is like that's what they're to say is someone that is truly free, right? Is when they can just live their life and no one can tell
Freedom
them
to sin.
otherwise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How?
Tom, I expected better of you.
I kind of did it myself. But it's honestly they're telling you to be a free, really choose your slavehood.
Really choose what?
Slavehood.
Your slavehood?
Yeah, like, all right, we're gonna take away all the possibility for you to escape, so you automatically choose the thing we want you to be, which is their slave, you know? It's like you guys have listened to Tom McDonald's song The System, right?
Probably.
Not actually.
Listen to The System.
I don't think I heard the system.
Oh, we'll have to play it again
Yeah, we should.
after this, but
Yeah, closing music.
Tom McDonald sponsor? No.
but yeah, and there's talks about like he does like the boy is he's a system, you know. He's looking over. I have to show you the music video too. He's like looking over, like the baby's crib, and he's like to the boy, he's like, "I'm gonna dress you in red, white, and blue, and you're gonna be patriotic. You're gonna fight for the world, be the peacemaker.
Yeah.
But you're fighting all of my wars." And then he's like to the girl, "I'm gonna objectify you and make you the sex object, so that you become the very person that makes more of these people that take over the world." So he's like, everything is mine.
Mm-hmm.
It's so good. So good. But like I think that's the thing is like people have been tricked multiple different manners to accept and want to be the very thing that will make them the least happy. It's like the greatest psyop in
Oh, that's so interesting.
history. It's like Satan essentially gives you the very thing you hate the most and gives it to you and says this is what you want the most.
Wow. Yeah.
That was deep.
All the bros are like, dog. No.
Bruh,
Bruh.
let's talk about this.
Let's talk about this. Life was way more cool.
But isn't like that's so countercultural right now to say like the way you can actually be the most free is by listening to someone else or by like obeying a law
That is
given to you by the right authority.
That has been countercultural forever.
No, not okay.
No. It has been like remember reading about the Spartans and being like these people are insane, right? And it was like their whole thing was we have the law upon our hearts, right? That was their whole motto in like throughout life was that.
Yeah, I think Greece is probably an anomaly, but
Okay.
think about like the years and years. I'm not saying this is a good thing, but like the very strict class divides where a huge portion of the population just built into their life to follow and to be obedient. And like I think, I mean, this is a different topic, but like in general, I think the value we put on obedience has slacked off a lot.
Oh,
in the past few
absolutely.
years. But I guess what I'm saying is like, yeah, this is idea of true love is saying that you're wrong, or true freedom is actually conforming yourself to some way of life, to some moral system that actually says you can't do some things, prohibits you. I think that's true, but I think it's really hard for people to stomach now. And because they've been told, like, I think maybe with, satanic roots that freedom is actually doing whatever the hell you want.
Yeah.
And we're losing this idea of freedom is actually the freedom to attain what you want, the freedom to reach your end. It's just instead the freedom to perform any activity that you want.
Or not even like it can even be defined in a more constrained way than that, just like beyond like the freedom to obtain your end, but we've lost sight of the freedom that is gained by being under law.
Yeah.
Just
yeah.
period, right? Like not being told, oh, you can go after whatever ends you want, but no, you should only go after these ends. And these are how you should go about those ends, right? Like there is a type of freedom that comes with that people are unaware of because it's a freedom from making the wrong choice, right? As long as that system is put in by the right people. But instead, that's looked at as oppressive now.
Yep.
Yeah, and then they'll enforce laws at the opposite thing, and then they want to follow those laws. It's like with California, they just put in this law where if a mother or parent tries to stop their kids from transitioning, they can be arrested.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's already happening, it's like, whoa. It's like they'll throw out all the good laws, say it's freedom, and then put all these terrible laws. and then want everyone else to follow them too.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
And that's another interesting point where like tolerance, not only is it like not love, as we've been talking about, but it's also you can't have, or like no one in today's world is really tolerant across the board.
No.
They're all like the people who are advocating for total tolerance or like letting everyone transition however they want. They're tolerant towards that, but then to people who say no, that's wrong, they're incredibly intolerant in a way that we haven't seen in I think a long time, like canceling them, removing all their posts, censoring them, like. So I guess the tolerance they have, it's not actually across the board. It's tolerance towards this and definitely not tolerance towards this.
Yeah. So interesting. I saw this other one meme and it was, I don't know if you guys have seen that one where it's like a guy in suspenders in an office building who's kind of looking out. You've probably seen it for sure. But on it, Donald Trump Jr. was like, so all you anti-gun people that hate guns so much, if you stop shooting at my dad, that'd be great.
Dang.
I was like, oh, that like puts it in a nutshell so well. But yeah.
I feel like we've talked a lot about how the world is messed up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything
The world is
happy
still
we can
good.
Talk about
Bourbon's pretty
what?
good.
What'd you say?
The world is still bourbon good.
It's true. Reason we know God loves us.
First miracle.
Prove me
yeah,
I'm
first
wrong.
miracle.
Listen,
Yeah,
if
okay,
I have faith, so I got
I-
faith in it. What do you?
Something beyond logic right here.
I have faith that's an unhealthy attitude.
Listen, I have an experiential knowledge and I have faith. What more do you need?
Yeah, I have faith too.
Tom, do you have anything happy you want to talk about? Or
Well, I'm just gonna mention that it was really funny. Father Schumacher was talking about the first miracle, and he's like, "Why did God like decide to make
Bunch of alcohol.
yeah wedding?"
Fair.
And he's like, it's not just like a little bit of alcohol. He's like, it was an absolutely massive amount of alcohol. He's like, that's 180 gallons of wine. That's huge.
Huge.
And
It's a lot of wine.
Back
Almost
when
as
they knew-
much wine as you have, Tom.
Back when they knew how to party,
it's like, how many people are at this wedding?
not enough.
I've never seen people go through 180 gallons at one wedding.
How much is in a bottle?
Check.
I feel like a quart and a half or something.
like a liter.
Don't give me none of that metric bullshit, though.
I mean,
America.
750 milliliters.
That is so unhelpful.
So it's not quite 1 liter, which
Like,
let me use this useful tool.
How dare you bring out that satanic device?
Uh,
You're just a cog of the machine, man.
oh yeah, that's me.
he just keeps the good times rolling.
Oh yeah, it is.
It's 26 ounces.
Okay, can we get?
Can we get to like
Can we-
gallons?
Gallons.
Okay.
6 gallons.
Wait, how many? I made 16.
It is almost a fifth of a gallon.
A fifth.
Yeah.
So we're saying
5 of those.
5 of those to get 1 gallon.
That's
To get
like
1 gallon.
500 and
No, 600.
No, it's
No,
Wait,
that's
how many
what,
gallons was it?
180.
Like,
That's-
that's a lot. That's a lot of gallons.
That's 800 gallons.
800.
800 bottles.
800 bottles.
So like,
800 oh my
That's crazy. This is the Dave Harvey.
Anyway, what was the
2022
point of-
Philip Malbec?
what was the point of him making so much wine?
Well, that's what Father's trying to ask. He's like, I think God really wants us to celebrate good things.
Listen, here's my favorite thing.
It was at a wedding too.
Yeah, exactly.
Huh?
And this is the objective reason why Catholic weddings are better is because there's alcohol.
Amen, brother.
And God said it was okay.
Yeah,
He endorsed it fully.
You'd never go to a Protestant. Speaking of Protestants, never go to a Protestant wedding. First, it's not okay. But second of all, they don't have alcohol. And it's like, why, man?
You don't have
The only time I went to a
Oh.
Protestant wedding was they had like a midday reception with cupcakes and lemonade.
Are you for realsies right now?
It was
Cupcakes and lemonade. What was this, like a 5th grade graduation?
a little bit, unfortunately.
Ew.
heck?
At least it's not a Mormon wedding.
Golden underwear.
Oh my gosh. What are we gonna do with the Mormons?
I still want. Okay. Yeah. No. I literally want to call up the Mormon missionaries and just ask them one day.
Dude, we could have him on the podcast.
We should have them on.
That would be interesting.
We need
Get some
Tom-
people. Have you had Dr. Schubert on the podcast? Okay. Interesting.
Dr. Schubert and
Uh,
Mr. Reverend Dr. Schubert.
no, it's Dr. Mr.
Dr.
Reverend
Reverend.
Schubert.
Okay, sorry.
No,
What?
Dr. Reverend Mr. Schubert.
Pretty sure that's what I said.
No,
Get it right, Ben.
listen.
Get them this-
This
Okay.
is my truth, and you said it wrong.
Tomato potato.
It's
Oh my goodness.
we're devolving. I lost my. I
Wait,
found
no,
one.
we're evolving. See, because humor is the pathway towards
Exactly.
this.
Oh yeah,
Practicing what he put forward as a solution to mankind.
I'm on my
We
way.
have more good times, there'll be less depression in the world. Means there's going to be less angsty people, which means there's going to be less weird people.
I believe this is a wake up call for you to do stuff. I call him the other day. Anyway, we're just gonna get personal now. And he just like picks up the phone and goes, "What?" And I'm like, "What kind of way is that to answer the phone?" That was like
My dear friend of 4 years.
that was
I will
heartbreaking.
start answering that way.
That was heartbreaking. I like to say.
I was in a bad moment when you
And I keep getting kind of roasted on
It's
you
true.
know, electronic devices.
It's true. Yeah, I don't
We need to talk about this.
have.
We need to have one of those sit down therapy moments.
Exactly.
Intervention.
Good.
And figure out why you're being bullied so much.
It's the friends I chose, apparently. I chose the right
You
ones,
chose-
apparently, according to our argument.
Putting you in your place. Yep.
Yeah.
What do you guys think of mental health?
It doesn't exist. Sorry. Anyway, that was my freshman year hot take. That's good.
I had a discussion with someone who their whole idea was to start a liberal arts based Catholic counseling service, like get their psychology degree and like start this whole business because they perceived it as a gap in the market. But I asked them straight up, I'm like, aren't you trying to do what a priest should be doing? And they're like, no. A priest should absolutely not be concerned with mental health. Like it's a totally different thing. And anyway, I don't know. This is probably too late to talk about this, but there's just like it seems like everyone's obsessing nowadays about mental health. Mental health
absolutely.
awareness, mental health awareness.
Mhm.
All these
Yeah.
therapists, better health, whatever. I'm not saying it's better help. I'm not saying it's bogus, but I don't know. I'm intrigued if it's actually how you should approach the problem you're facing, the struggles you're facing, or should it be something else that is helping you through those things?
I think as up until the point that it becomes the reason for the problem, it's a good thing to be aware of. Like I think everybody, yes, has mental health. Yeah, I'll clarify. I think every body has like a mental health. Like we all go through our struggles, depression, sadness, all these things are like real things that and emotions that we are going to feel. But until when like my mental health becomes like the reason that I need therapy or the reason that I'm feeling like I'm depressed because I have bad mental health right now. Right? When that starts becoming the reason for the ways that I'm like actively feeling like constantly, like when we're just like it's always going to go back to my mental health and it's no longer looking at like what is happening in your life. Right? It's not like, oh, I'm having a dry spot in my spiritual health right now. And that's why I'm feeling a little bit depressed. I'm having a rough time with my friends right now.
Yeah.
I'm sad, like once we stop relating like concrete things with our emotions and instead we just start saying, oh, my mental health is bad. And so blah, 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 blah. Like, I think that like once we disassociate that from reality, which is kind of what we've been talking about this whole time, that's when I can see it being very problematic, which is what I feel like the world has done. We've made this big thing out of, mental health, but we're no longer looking at it as, like as a thing that can actually be solved. We're looking at it as a thing like,
Yeah.
out there.
I think once you obsess over mental health in a secular way, like all that you can do is manage symptoms. Like if you, I don't know, if you face your suffering that you're facing, and you say I'm going through this just because I have a diagnosis or because I have OCD, because I have depression. That's why I'm depressed. I'm depressed because I have this, scientific disorder that I can't help.
Mm-hmm.
That's when it seems like it's counterproductive because all you can do at that point is take, antidepressants or do other kind of coping mechanisms that maybe they're helpful, but yeah, I think it's dangerous when you stop looking at your actual life and a more holistic picture when it's just focused on like the brain chemistry and messing around with that. Well, I don't know. I think it's also just a really touchy subject because I think there is a lot of value to it, like caring about your mental health, but you have to be careful to do it in the right way.
Yeah. It's interesting too because I think one of the benefits of people becoming over obsessed with mental health is that it's actually being addressed now because I don't know, I mean post World War II, like there were thousands and thousands of World War II vets coming back from war and struggling with massive amounts of PTSD, turning to alcohol and then killing themselves because of the horrors they encountered and the mental scarring that they went through. And it's been shown that that's something that can be inherited, not necessarily from like having those experiences, but like just like some people are genetically more likely to get heart attacks, some people are genetically more likely to have severely worse depression than other people. And I think one of the benefits of actually the whole like obsession with mental health, even though I think it has made a lot of people way too soft and like way too concerned with themselves and working on themselves and just thinking about themselves all the time, which makes you more depressed. But in spite of that, I think it's super helpful because now we've found out about things like CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, which is like where the brain is exposed to multiple, like a large number of impacts that tear these microscopic connections in the brain. Anyways, it's a lot more than
brain hits do you have to add
it depends on your it depends on your biology. So some people, and especially in like the special forces world where you're constantly exposed to blasts, like blast exposure is a huge thing in the special forces community, especially with Navy SEALs. I mean, I only know this because I listen to Jocko Willink, who's super cool dude. But anyways,
sponsor.
No, but like some special forces guys can be exposed to a huge amount of blasts and their brains are more or less okay. And then other guys can go through like a couple tours and then their brain looks like the brain of a 60-year-old man and they're like 25. And they can check these things with like CAT scans and that sort of thing. And so I think that's actually been super helpful with actually understanding like, okay, why is it that on average 22 veterans kill themselves per day?
Wow.
And like the military community is really, really small. So that's a huge number.
Like,
that's absolutely crazy. I mean, there are other factors and not every single one of those dudes is special forces, but a lot of special forces guys commit suicide. And that's a horrible, horrible thing. And then there's also just like the genetic side. Like I know multiple people who have like genetically inherited depression. And one of them is actually a priest now. And he was talking to me about it. He's like, yeah, my dad, me, and a number of my brothers all have clinically diagnosed depression, and we could be on a medication for it. And like that's something we could actually absolutely get. But he specifically said that he chose not to get medication because he didn't want to like he didn't want to take antidepressants for like his own reasons. But he said something that was immensely helpful for him was doing mental prayer. Which I thought was super, super interesting. Because I'd never really heard or done mental prayer before, but like the way he's describing it was very, very interesting to me. And he said the more often he did it, the less depressed he was. But
Yeah.
I think
You
there
probably
are.
don't hear very many like therapists telling you to do that.
See, and
I
that's
don't know, Jordan Peterson seems to kind
Yeah.
of point that direction. He says,
Although he's like getting totally persecuted by the psychology like board.
"Oh, yeah, of course he is." Yeah.
He actually said that on the Sean Ryan show. He said that um, he thinks the best way to cure mental problems is to go to confession.
really.
Really?
And
Is he
that's-
Catholic? I didn't know he was.
His
His
wife's
wife is.
Catholic. She
Oh.
just converted.
Yeah.
And Michaela's on the way.
I think he's on the way too.
I think
He's
so,
just
too.
I think he
he's
should
just
give
kind
that
of like
WCC.
Aristotle right now. He's like a noble pagan kind of.
He keeps getting stuck on the does he believe in God thing.
That's
Yeah.
a tough one. Not gonna lie.
Not the first person who's done that.
Well, I think his understanding of belief is much different than what other people say. I think when other people are like, I believe in God, we're saying that we believe that he exists and that he's out there. When Jordan Peterson talks about do you believe in God, he believes in the ramifications of all that. Like if you believe in
yeah.
God, then he's like, well, you have to understand that he's an all-knowing, all-powerful, all-thing being.
Mhm.
And what does that mean in your life? What is the implications of all these things? So I think for
Yeah.
him, it's such a massive weight on his head.
Yeah.
Of
Yeah.
just like, oh, what do I have to actually be now if God exists?
I can't
Yeah.
say I believe until I live in full view of all those implications.
Exactly.
That's a much harder thing to do. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I just remember there was one podcast I was listening to where he was going off about how he was so frustrated when people would ask him if he believed in God. He was like, "Do I believe that there is a metaphysically necessary, like uncreated, metaphysical?" I can't remember exactly what he said, but he was basically like, "I can't see how it could be otherwise."
Yeah.
It wasn't so much a belief as it was just an acceptance of God's existence, I guess.
Yeah, it's interesting about the mental health thing. So, I've recently discovered, as in like the past 5 years, that I've had mental illness. I just didn't know what it was. So, I don't know if you guys experience this. Ben, I've talked to Ben about this a few times, but like, so my brain like feels like a ping pong ball. It's like all the time. So like my thinking about an idea probably lasts like 2 milliseconds. Into the next thing, next thing, next thing, next thing. And so like for me to like think through something logically it takes a lot of effort because I'm usually just like bouncing all over to these things and kind of putting it together and then like,
Yeah.
okay, this makes sense. But it made a lot of problems when I was younger because I didn't explain my route of thought. So people are like, how in the world did you get there?
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense, but what?
Sounds like me and Seven.
So, but for me, I found out that it's been a nutrient imbalance.
Wow.
Is it? So, like ADD, ADHD, OCD, which are all things I have trouble with, like anxiety. It's all my body doesn't process food into the nutrients it needs for natural function.
Huh.
And that is like the main cause for ADD in people. It's like because about 40% of people have that gene malfunction.
Hmm.
So it's like your body just can't get the nutrients it needs. So it's just we're running in critical mode. And so ADD is essentially so your mind has to construct thoughts and then deconstruct thoughts. So like it does that cycle so it can always have space. ADD is like you have too many thoughts in your mind at once and you can't get rid of them fast enough. So then you have to go back in between all of them all at once to try to make everything work.
Wow.
So I've wondered if a lot of like the mental health things is all health related in the sense of like we're just not getting the right food or the right amounts of food or things like that, and then it kind of plays out in mental health things that then become anxiety, depression, and a lot of people like trying to talk about it because like what's happening? I'm trying to figure it out, but I think there's something wrong with me, and no one's been able to help.
Yeah.
I think with the opportunity of like everyone's like, oh, we can talk about it now. Everyone's like,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I definitely agree with that. You know, they take it to the extreme of like, oh, well, my mental health is my problem for everything.
Yeah. It's also I think mental health therapy is harmful and dangerous when it ultimately just makes you sit in your problems and like I guess going back to what I was saying, like just symptom management or just teaching. I mean, maybe there's a way in which it's needed for a while, but if it doesn't look at like the root of the problem or doesn't actually try to fix where things are coming from, it instead just teaches you to look at everything through the lens of, oh, I have OCD and therefore this problem in my life can be explained by that and I can't help it. Like that's all I can do. That's where I think it's actually incredibly harmful, and it's actually preventing people from doing what they need to do to genuinely improve their lives. And it's instead just, okay, you're gonna have to sit in this problem for the rest of your life. Here's some ways to manage it a little bit better. Um, Sometimes maybe that's the truth, if it's especially if it's like an actual real problem like you were talking about, like maybe you have PTSD or something that you can't, it is genetic, and in that case absolutely, like you need to learn how to handle that, and there's tools for that now. But in some of these things I think, why are you depressed? Maybe it's not just because your brain is off in chemistry in one little way. Maybe it's because, as a whole person, you're disordered. You're not virtuous. You're not in relation to God in the right way. And I think if you say, okay, my only way for solving depression is going to a therapist and taking a drug or going through psychotherapy, you're losing those other solutions that are actually more meaningful.
It's definitely not by cutting down on your 8 hours per day spent on your phone. It's not.
No,
Definitely.
That is
definitely. Actually, you should get our app and spend more hours on it.
Okay, we back it up for the night, you think, and do this again?
Yeah, no, that was great. I think we need to be happier next time.
Oh,
I had a depression. With angst.
next time you should bring tequila instead of whiskey. Maybe.
Is that what that makes the mood better? Have margaritas all around.
Oh, listen.
We do a different mixed drink every time.
I think we've only had straight whiskey like every time.
Real men,
Yeah.
Sorry. How many bottles of wine do we have left? Wait, let me count.
How much wine have y'all been drinking?
He's been drinking a bit.
My gosh, Ben.
He's Italian.
I'm aware.
Wow.
Okay.
There was like 30 here
To
last
be
night.
fair, 12. That's 12.
Okay.
And there's like more than half a bottle in the fridge. That's really old. And
It's
Like
I could-
20 bottles of wine then.
No,
I cooked with a lot of it.
right, sure.
You're still consuming it if you cook with it.
No, but not the alcohol.
It gets cooked out.
Yeah. It's totally healthy, John. Listen. Don't think about the
I
science.
think you
too
need to
much,
become a
no.
more well-rounded person.
Oh, I'm not checking, man.
Remember what they said, in vino est veritas.
Yeah, man.
Very true.
Not even close to 800
then I also
bottles of
gave-
wine.
Wait, well, not gave away, but brought to occasions or opened at occasions.
Yeah, where was my
It's
bottle?
not
You're
just me,
giving it
okay?
away.
I'm not an alcoholic.
Mom,
Mom,
dad.
You both owe me.
No.
I brought whiskey.
That's not helping my case. Maybe I should go to therapy.
Yeah, I
Seems
just
good there. Oh.
I know a great therapy group. They're called Solutions. So with doctors James Urbancic and Thomas Crowley.
To get in contact with those guys.
Imagine at James's wedding. they have them.
I cannot wait. So funny.
That'd be true.
Dude, I'm taking, well, I think you already know it. I'm taking their photos. At least during their reception. They already have somebody for the mass, but not.
Oh, that's fun.
I'm so stoked.
Oh no, you wanna put a piece over there,
Everything.
Wow, why would you cut from that direction? Like, well,
Thinking outside the box. Right?
why would you cut it that big? Like, I'm just confused now.
Thank you very much. Oops.
Yes. Stop.
See ya.